Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to this year's Bolin Legacy Weekend and joining us for the Adulting Panel session hosted by Sisterhood. Although 2020 has been off to a difficult start, I have hope that our community will overcome as we always have. That being said, I would like to start by thanking Sisterhood for inviting me to be the moderator for today's event. For those of you that don't know my name is Valerie Oyakhilome, and I graduated from Williams College in 2018 with a degree in political science and a concentration in Africana and leadership studies. I currently work in New York City as a corporate and intellectual property law paralegal, and I am excited to be able to learn from these remarkable women today on this panel. With the help of the former Dean of Students, Dr. Rashonda Booker, I founded Sisterhood in 2015 as a transfer sophomore from Fairleigh Dickinson University. When I first arrived at Williams, I was pleasantly surprised and inspired by the incredible Black women whom I encountered. Though we appeared to be few and far between, our lived experiences brought us to this place, which has changed the course of our lives forever in more ways than one. It has now been 5 years since Sisterhood was formed, and looking back as an alum, it brings me great pride to see the way the organization has evolved and is still evolving. I spoke with the current co-president of Sisterhood, Sonia Nyarko, class of 2021, and was delighted to hear about the many exciting events that Sisterhood still programs for Black women. From our signature melanin masquerade balls and self-care spa days to open and intellectual discussions on the various aspects of navigating the world as a double and sometimes triple minority, Sisterhood has become a home for many Black women who are simply just trying to figure it out. While we do so, it is important to remember that we can tap into the knowledge and support of those who laid the groundwork before us. Today's adulting panel features some outstanding trailblazers who have dedicated their time to share with us their knowledge and perspectives. We have the amazing opportunity to learn from Nichole Gabrielenko, class of 09, Cortney Tunis, class of 04, and Barbara Sanders, class of 79, and can expect to collect loads of gems from them. But first, some guidelines for this virtual panel discussion. Number one, each panelist will have the opportunity to introduce themselves before answering a series of questions related to adulting. Number two, the panel features a Q&A segment at the end, and thanks to technology, we will be taking questions throughout the session using the Q&A button on the Zoom toolbar below. We will try to get to as many questions as we can within the time. However, if time runs out, you're welcome to continue the conversation through the college's eFlink network. Number three, this session will be recorded and posted to the college's YouTube page at a later time. So don't fret if you need to step away for a second, it will be recorded and you can access it at a later time. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite Nicole to kick us off with a brief introduction, followed by Cortney, then Barbara.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be on this panel today and to be able to participate in this virtual event, even though we can't be on campus. So I'm really excited to connect, particularly in light of what's happening in the world, especially the murders of Ahmaud Arbery and Sean Reed and the large disparity in deaths from COVID within Black and Latinx communities. I think this is such an important organization to have on campus and also conversation to have among alumni and students. So thank you very much. I graduated from Williams in 2009. I was an English major with a concentration in Latino studies, and I loved it. But one of the things I loved the most is that it really helped open my eyes to some of the more indoctrinated and systemized ways of oppression and ways that we can bring light to it and fight it. So after Williams, I went on to work at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York under Preet Bharara, and I worked on criminal cases with some prosecutors who have become lifelong mentors and friends. And I was there really trying to figure out if I wanted to go to law school or not, and if I felt that being a prosecutor was something that I could do in good conscience. And one of the things that I learned while working there is that, yes, there were prosecutors around the country, and particularly in that office, who were making a huge difference in the criminal justice system by pursuing justice, not as, oh, we catch bad guys, but what's the right thing to do here? And how do we create equity with the laws that we're enforcing? And that really encouraged me to go to law school and continue pursuing a career in law. And so I did. I worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office for 3 years, and then I went to BU Law, which brought me to Boston. And I graduated from BU Law. I was highly involved with diversity and equity while at BU. And I went on to a corporate law firm. And at that corporate law firm, I realized how few people looked like me, and how few people in all of Boston, when you talked about equity partners or even just female partners in Boston in the legal field, you were talking about a number that you can count on 2 hands max. And that's even going back generations. And so I was really committed to, how do we help grow our network? How do we help grow this community? And where is the support lacking? Why are people not staying in these positions? And as I was kind of digging into that work, I ended up developing a crippling neurological disorder, which led me to leave the firm. And I have been working for the past 3.5 years, on recovering and dealing with life as, you know, another minority now with a disability, and doing women's health advocacy work. And that has been a total ride. It's been more than I ever expected to know and learn, but it's been a great place to apply my advocacy skills. So I started and founded Nicole Gabrielenko, which is a consulting firm that helps businesses and organizations have hard conversations that allow them to create equitable workplaces so people can show up as they really are. And so I've been doing that and running my blog, Melanin and Moxie for Women of Color, for about 2 years now. So that's my my shtick, and I will pass it on to Cortney.
Thanks so much, Nicole. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you. I am class of 2004 from Williams, the Mighty O4s. And I grew up outside of Boston, came to Williams, really excited about it. I loved it. I really love going back to school and doing things like this, giving back to the community. And I have, as my personal understanding of equity and justice has grown over the course of my life, I have tried to bring that into my work with Williams. So that's been my sort of arc as a Williams person. But when I was an English major, and I became a teacher for a brief stint, which I think there's a question about that, so I will leave that for that question. And then I really had loved art history when I was at Williams, but I didn't get a chance to be an art history major because I took my full, excuse me, my full junior year in Rome. And so I just I didn't have enough credits to do that. So I went back to school. I have a master's in humanities from the University of Chicago that I used to study art history. And then I worked for the Chicago History Museum, and then moved back to the Northern Berkshires and worked at Mass MoCA in the education department. Actually, I was the education department. There was only me for about 2.5 years. And in that work, got a chance to work with the Northern Berkshire school system and expand the museum education program to touch even more students there. I just had a fabulous time living back close to school, getting a chance to be near the things that I loved, but also really immerse myself in the life in North Adams, which is different, just down the road, but very different. After leaving Mass MoCA, I went to work at Wheelock College in Boston, which has now become part of Boston University. And Wheelock, the motto was inspire a world of good. And all of the students there were in programs that were focused on social service. So teachers, social workers, being the people who work with students who are in long-term hospital stays, a really dedicated campus full of people who were really focused on how they could help others. And I ran the materials library. So when a student was, for example, interning in a classroom, they could check out 10 educational watches to do a section on time. So I learned a lot about what students are learning and when in their developmental cycles, which was very different, something I'd never known before. And my connection from Mass MoCA, where I had been doing tours and working with students, was thinking differently about how you can teach and thinking about materials in a creative way. And that was a fun thing that I got to do in that job that also had a very rote piece of it because it was a library and libraries and rules are very strict. And during that time, I was also a resident director at Wheelock, did that for 4 years. And halfway through being a resident director, when I was working full-time for Wheelock, I started to feel like I wanted to be part of the larger decision-making processes at the places where I was working. So Mass MoCA it's a relatively small staff for a massive museum, and I got to have a lot of impact there, which was fantastic. And Wheelock was a universal, Wheelock was a larger institution that I didn't really have power beyond my own little part that I ran. And I was like, I want to be in the office where I make decisions. So I went back to school again. I do like school a lot. And I got my MBA from BU. So 2 BU people here. And there I studied actually leadership and especially leadership in transition. I did a public and nonprofit master's there. So that is, you do your regular MBA, but then your focus is on running public and nonprofit organizations. And when I left BU, I became an executive recruiter at an organization called Isaacson Miller. And that is a recruiting firm that works exclusively with mission-driven organizations and has a mandate to be creating diverse leadership at the places where we work. And that was a really fabulous thing to do right after school. I got a chance to learn about incredible leaders and find them their next positions, which is always great. And also be part of changing the faces of what leadership looks like in a variety of different places. And so that was a really great job. But after the 2016 election, actually just before the 2016 election, I got involved with an organization called Pantsuit Nation, which began as a very small Facebook group, and then within 24 hours had 24,000 people in it, and then a week had 1 million in it, and by election day, which was 2.5 weeks after it was founded, it had 3 million people in it. And I was first just a moderator, and then became close with the woman who founded it. And after the election, we realized that we had 3 million people and we needed something to ask them to do. And so we started a nonprofit. I left my job at Isaacson Miller in the summer of 2017 to be the founding executive director of Pantsuit Nation. And we did it backwards. We had the large group and then we put the organization underneath it, which was really an incredible challenge. I used a lot of the entrepreneurial things that I learned at school that I didn't think I was ever going to actually have to use at work, but there we were. And just recently, last December, Pantsuit Nation merged with a new organization called Supermajority, which is a gender equity organization that is really trying to bring as many women as possible into their power so that we can get out there and change the things that are going very, very wrong. So that's me.
Well, thank you so much. That's incredible. Barbara?
Okay, so I'm Barbara Sanders, and I came to Williams in 1975. I spent my life growing up in two places, Washington, D.C., and then outside of Boston to the west in Auburndale, Massachusetts. So I spent part of my time at Williams in Massachusetts, and then my family moved back to Washington. I was a biology major, and then ultimately I went to medical school. I finished at Howard in Washington, D.C. I spent my clinical training also in Atlanta, and I did my residency out on Long Island. And after finishing residency, we moved to New York City. I lived in Brooklyn and then in the Bronx, and my family's been in White Plains. So I've been at Montefiore Medical Center in two departments, in the Department of Family Medicine and in the Department of Pediatrics. I saw patients in one of their outpatient settings and then also in the hospital. And about 10 years ago, I made a career change at Montefiore, and I work with their school health program. So currently I am working in a school-based health center in a high school in the Bronx. Due to the COVID epidemic, which has really changed the whole landscape of medicine and the delivery of medical services, I'm working in another part of the medical center assisting with urgent care. But that kind of summarizes what I'm doing now.
Wow, thank you so much. So everyone who has tuned in, as you can see, our panelists have a variety of experiences and perspectives and have accomplished great feats in their respective personal and professional lives. So I'm pretty excited to sort of jump into the questions right now. So in any particular order, just to kick it off, what does adulting mean to you?
I would say that adulting means the transition from being a student to a lifelong adult learner. And it's a continuum. It doesn't, 21 is an arbitrary number, but it's a continuous process that occurs through your 20s, your 30s and 40s, and into your 50s and 60s. So it's a continuum and it's a transition.
Yeah, I love that definition because I do think there's this idea that you achieve the next level, like you level up once you hit the next decade, whatever that decade is, and you're always growing. If you're doing it right, you're always learning, you're always growing, and there will always be challenges that are difficult. And it's our job to kind of keep growing and keep learning and keep pushing them. So the first thing I think of when I think of adulting is bills, which is no fun. And I had a lot less of them when I was at school. And learning how to navigate finances, right? And things like that, when you do not come from generational wealth, you may not have access to. And so I think about that, but I also recognize that even if you're able to amass generational wealth, it then becomes your job to learn, how do you lift others up? How do you spread that and continue it going? So I would completely agree with Barbara on her definition.
I would add that I think a critical part of adulting for me is really listening to myself and my gut instincts and the things that I want, and not letting external forces be impacting my decision making. It's hard, especially now in a world where, I'm going to say the cliche thing, and I work in social media, so I think I'm allowed to. Social media is an incredibly influential platform in positive and negative ways. And it's not just that. We all went to Williams, where people are really, really successful, and that can be a difficult yardstick to measure yourself against. And I think that along with what Barbara and Nicole said, I would add that I started to feel like an adult when I started to live my life for myself.
Wow, that's amazing. I definitely agree with the continuing sort of process involved in adulting. It's not just something which I expected it would be, something where you get to that stage and then you're there and all your life's problems are figured out. No, it's a constant process, constant leveling up, and I definitely thank you for that. And also for me, since I graduated in 2018. Adulting has been for me the ability to, I guess, decide to confront life head on. And so I feel like at school I was very much cushioned, meals paid, or meals were cooked for me. I didn't have to worry about bills or anything. So when you adult, I guess, or when you graduate, it's kind of one of those reality checks, like, wow, I actually have to make decisions, like Cortney was saying, make decisions for myself and my well-being. And I definitely agree. But quickly, for the attendees, I would like to quickly highlight the Q&A portion. So essentially, we'll be collecting questions throughout the session. So if you can take a quick look at the toolbar at the bottom of your screen, if you're looking at this Zoom via your laptop, at the top if you're looking at it from a mobile device. But there's a Q&A button at the bottom. Drop your questions in there and we will try to get to them at the end of the session in the Q&A segment. So just so everyone's clear. And we're gonna move on to the next question. The next question is, amidst this global health crisis, how are you all balancing the need to care for yourself and your loved ones with your professional responsibilities?
I can begin with that. I live in White Plains, New York, which is in Westchester County, which has been at times the epicenter of this COVID epidemic. And it's been a balance. It's been a very sobering experience. There have been times when I've read, when I read my local newspaper and, I would skim the obituaries, and typically there would be on any given day about 20, 25. During the apex of this crisis, the number would swell up to 75. So we had 3 times as many people in this community that were succumbing to the illness. And then as I would read it, I would see the names of people that I knew, or the family member of someone that I knew. And I can even say, even in my church, we've already lost about 5 people during this pandemic. Some I knew them personally, and some I knew who they were. And it's just to say, it's very distressing news in terms of the impact that COVID has had nationally, but also locally. But what I've taken from this is the news is distressing, but it's still important to know what's going on and to get current and accurate information. And I think accurate is important when trying to keep the emotion and the politics out of this, but the number of distractions and incorrect information that's being put out there. And so it's important to know how to filter and read information critically and stay important, because so that we can all survive this. If we've gotten this far, we're very fortunate, but it's not over. So we still have to survive, and it's very clear that we still have to follow the recommendations of our governors and of the departments of health and the Centers for Disease Control, because it's not over and we have to get through this. Something else that I've also been doing is reaching out to people that I know. a number of people, and I have friends and relatives in other states, in other parts of the country, just checking in, seeing how people are doing, because some people are living by themselves. Their children may have moved out of the house. Some are senior citizens who may be living alone, and they're afraid of how vulnerable they may be. People that I know who have pre-existing medical conditions who are very concerned. And just checking in with people and seeing how they're doing and periodically being connected, because it's a very stressful time for all of us, but for any of us, just to make sure that we're still connected.
I first want to say I'm really sorry for your losses, Barbara, and thank you for the service that you continue to do during these hard times. Everyone on the front lines, I think I am just so grateful, and I'm grateful that they are getting more spotlight than they normally do, and hopefully being less taken for granted, especially as someone who cares deeply about social justice and equity. We know that Black and Brown folks are usually those people on the front lines. So I want to thank you specifically for your work. And also, yeah, so it's been a little different for me in this COVID era, because in many ways my life hasn't looked much different than when I got sick. And so when I got sick and I had to leave the firm, I often spend weeks on end housebound and needing, my husband to help me get around the house or to make meals or things like that. And so COVID for me has really been a shift of thinking of self-care in, yes, what do I need today to get me through, but also of thinking of self-care in how do I care for the people I care about. And so we are currently at my parents' house. We've been here, I was counting last week. I was like, it's day 60 something of, being self-isolated. But we've been fortunate enough to be able to stay with them for the past about 2 months. And that has allowed my husband time to do his work and not always have to worry about what are we going to eat tonight, and to be able to divide up chores such as like laundry and going grocery shopping and things like that. So that's helped take some of the burden off of us as just one family unit and really reaching out to that larger family unit. So that's been really helpful for me. I've also been working to balance, part of your question is how do you balance it with life? And I don't know that you'll ever get a balance. I think someone told me once, like, you can never have a balance. And if people tell you you can, they're really just not telling you the truth. And so accept that at one point or another, work might be more heavy or life might be more heavy, and just accept that. And I've carried that with me in this sense. I don't think that person was entirely right. I do think that you can get close to balance, though. I think it's important to check in with yourself throughout the day. And I think it's important to check in with yourself every week, every couple weeks, to know, am I achieving what I want to achieve personally? Am I taking care of myself? Am I taking care of the people who I care about? And what is actually my priority? And I think that's the biggest and the hardest thing, because we live and work in systems very often that make us think that the priority is, a client letter that the client's not going to sign for another like 5 days. And that was one of the most frustrating things for me as an attorney, having to meet these deadlines that were just not realistic deadlines and didn't actually need to be done when they were done. So for me, it's been about checking that, like, am I making realistic deadlines? And I actually prioritizing the things that I need to prioritize and that are important to me. And that's the way I've been taking care of myself.
I will just quickly add that I've been baking. That's been my thing that I've been doing, and I'm not very good at it. So I create a lot of things that I eat not very happily, but I very much have enjoyed making them. And I think that just is it's a new skill that I'm teaching myself. I worked from home and I live alone. And so similarly to, I think what you were said, Nicole, like my day-to-day life doesn't look that different. What does look different are the things that I'm allowed to do outside of work. I used to be able to go outside and hang out with friends and all of that. And so I have filled some of that space with learning this new skill. And hopefully by the end, I will be enjoying the baking and the eating equally as much.
Oh, that's awesome. You definitely have to share recipes because we're a whole cooking community here. I would say that's something that I found pretty therapeutic as well, is like baking and cooking and experimenting in the kitchen. Otherwise, I've really taken the time to sit down and, think about what really matters. Because I feel like even coming from like a Williams background, I was so used to being busy all the time. And it sort of transferred into how I was approaching my professional and personal life. So when COVID happened, yes, there was the cloud of anxiety that was, basically eating at me. But then I also was able to take a step back and say, if not now, then when can I work on myself and actually do the work to, towards personal growth. So COVID has been very interesting and transformative in that way. But at the same time, I've been working from home, and transitioning from the typical like law firm setting to working from home when there's, it's very difficult to get packages out, or it's very difficult to respond to things electronically, depending on what they are. That was definitely a huge adjustment, but with everything, you sort of have to take it day by day because it is the novel coronavirus. So definitely agree with everyone. The next question we have is, what was your first job post-Williams? Did it align with what you envisioned for your career? And also, what tips do you have for current students on the job search? I know it's like a two-part thing.
I can start with that one. So my very first job out of Williams is that I worked in retail. I was a salesperson, and that actually served me well as being a job that I went back to when I was in between sort of career moments. And so I didn't know that it was going to be a skill set that would be helpful when I really needed it, but it became that. But then after that, about 1 year later, I was a teacher. I was a 7th grade teacher, and I lived in a dorm. It was at a private school outside of Boston, and I I was teaching in the classroom, but I also had requirements where I had to work on extracurricular activities. And that's really when I figured out that I didn't necessarily I wanted to know if I wanted to be on the academic side of things. And I was able to explore that when I went into my master's program the next year, because a lot of what that master's program did was prepare people for PhDs. And being in the master's program, it became very clear to me at the time that a PhD was not my path. I really wanted to be more in the hands-on, in the interacting with people directly in the space as much as possible. So I went into the job. I was an English major, so I was like, English major, English teacher, this is what you do. But came out the other side of the job having a much better sense of the elements of a career that I wanted to bring into my next steps.
I love that you mentioned working in retail, Cortney, because I think, tying to something Valerie mentioned earlier, there is this like stigma against, normal jobs at Williams. And if you don't become a banker, you don't go to med school, you don't go to law school, there's a lot of kind of like, oh, well, are you successful? Are you succeeding? And I know for me, my first job, I was really lucky. I got it through an alum at Williams. At the time I was at Williams, there was a program called Williams in New York. And I did that for a semester. And that's when I first worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And when I graduated, I said, can you help me look for a job? I don't have a job yet. I'm open to these different fields. And he said, oh, there's an opening here in my office for a criminal paralegal specialist. Do you want to apply? And so I was really, really fortunate. My husband is class of 2010, and that was right when the recession was really hitting people. And so he had a very different story about how much people could or couldn't help from the alumni network. And I just really appreciate you pointing out, like, hey, these are all really useful skills, and really you just don't know the path life's gonna take, and we can learn so much from really anything you do as long as it aligns with what you're interested in, or tells you what you're not interested in, then it's useful, and we should kind of carry that with us.
I think also, just really quickly, if it makes space for you to do the things that you are interested in, if that role allows you, one of the longer stints I did in retail, I was interning at the Chicago History Museum. And so having that other job allowed me to do this unpaid position. So I think it's both of those.
Yeah.
So this has been an interesting discussion, because actually my first job out of Williams was also retail, which tided me over to my next job, where I worked at the Substance Abuse Institute at Howard. And that I worked at that job until I went to medical school. And it does align with the work that I do, because the reality is substance abuse is such a prevalent issue I would say, in this country. And it's not only do I just see it in practice, but I see it publicly too. So it definitely did align with the career path that I would be taking.
Oh, that's awesome. So I have only been working for 2 years. I graduated in 2018. I've been grateful for the experience. It has been very much eye-opening to let me know sort of where I envision myself. Because even though for me as an undergrad, I thought I was going to be a lawyer, as it stands right now, I don't necessarily think I'll be taking that path. And to make that decision, and even to get here, has been a whole journey on its own. And that is why I would like to tell, any students that are watching this, if there's, some things that you do take away, it's that it's okay to try things out. It's okay to pivot. Mm-hmm. And don't be afraid to sort of let other people down. It's only like about yourself and how you feel about yourself, because ultimately you don't want to get trapped in a job that you're not happy with. And if that's the case and you don't see other options, then, learn from our panelists and create the happiness that you kind of want. And as far as tips go for students on the job search, keep going. It's always going to be a difficult process. COVID-19 does not make it easier at all, but that's why you have to persevere and keep going. I would say I read articles about it. Just follow trends. I would say, just because our society does not really know what they're doing or how to basically combat this. So given that, it's very important to keep reading up on articles, keep reading up on trends. Maybe it might be something where maybe the job that you were interested in is no longer available, or the company that you wanted to work for, could not survive this pandemic. Take the moment, take the time to sort of restructure and see, what are the elements of the job that you want, and where can you see it sort of transferring in other industries.
I just want to tag on to that really quickly, partially because I love doing this and I mentor a lot. And so some of the things I would say, like concrete things, if you're looking for, update your LinkedIn, make sure it's updated, and keys in on the things that you're interested in, that you've studied. Also, be willing to broaden your search. Be willing to not just say, well, I want to be a lawyer and I'm only taking paralegal jobs. There are a ton of people I went to law school with who had really interesting jobs. Most of them were not paralegals. You know, most of them did other things, and the skills can transfer. The things you learn will matter. When you learn about a population deeply, whether you're working with a homeless population or a substance abuse population, and your goal is later on to either represent those people or to help them, giving them medical advice, you really want to make sure you widen your kind of search field. So that would be the second thing. And then the third thing, I'm a lawyer, we do things in threes. The third thing would just be reach out to your network, like all of it. Don't let the privilege and stuffiness of the bubble kind of encapsulate you. Reach out to the people who got you there. So your village, your parents, your uncles, your anybody. And don't be afraid to say, hey, I'm job searching, or hey, I'm struggling. I know it can be really hard, and I know that there's this sometimes shame that comes along with having to ask for help. And sometimes it can feel like, well, my parents paid for me to get this education, and now, you know, I'm struggling, or I'm going to end up at X job, or, you know, I paid for this education, and, you know, where's it getting me? Remember, it's a long-term plan. And so ask for help, accept the help that you get, and then constantly be ready to keep pivoting. And that's not something that is new to minority communities. So remember, that's within you, and you can keep doing that.
Very well said. Thank you. Really quickly, everyone, for those who might have tuned in a little bit late, I'd just like to plug the Q&A box for this Zoom session. So essentially, we'll be taking questions and we'll be addressing them at the later half of this panel discussion. So direct your eyes to the bottom of your screen. There's a Q&A box where you can drop your questions. If you're tuning in on a mobile device, the Q&A box, I believe, is at the top of your screen. But feel free to drop questions, and we'll be sure to get to some of them towards the end of the Zoom session. And then as far as the next question goes, I think this one is, I've been waiting for this question, guys. As a professional, what's the biggest lesson you've learned in the workplace?
I would say one of the big lessons that I've learned, and I think I would recommend this for everyone, is to always search for new skills so that you're not, I mean, I hate to use the word, but so that you're not getting stale. Because when it comes time for promotions, those are the kind of things that people are looking for. When they're looking for raises, or so you're looking for a raise. What have you done to improve yourself or make yourself more valuable to the organization since you've been there? What technical skills or technological skills, because we're in a world now that is driven by technology. So what technological skills, you know, in terms of becoming computer savvy, have you mastered? Because if you look on many job postings, they mention what skills are a must. And most of those in terms, I mean, you can use, you all know these terms better than I do, but in terms of Microsoft Office, the different applications, because you're going to need those, you know, we're getting away from pencil and paper and using more things on the computer. So that's what I would recommend. And also, again, the underlying theme of networking, getting to know people, making sure that you come to important meetings. Because as someone once said to me, it's approximately 90% of a meeting is showing up and connecting with people. Maybe 10% is the content of the meeting. You don't go there for the content, you go there to connect with people and be seen. So those are just some of the things that I would share in terms of some of the lessons that I've learned. And how do you build up your resume in such a way to make you more attractive in terms of getting promoted and getting raises and bonuses and moving further along in your career.
I want to echo some of that. My mentors have been really incredible, and I think we are often taught, or we just learn to have blinders on. So look for mentors that aren't necessarily in your field or in your specific practice, but who you have something in common with, or who you can relate to, or who you just admire, and be willing to learn from anybody and everybody. And I think those are the things that have served me the best, especially as I have transitioned in different industries. And those are the people who have been in my corner, no matter whether I'm at that job or a different job. So I think that is one of the big takeaways. I think that at Williams, I learned a lot. You know, you show up, you do class and stuff like that, and you just leave sometimes and go hang out with your friends. Think of work as going to be more of that, but like, you need to show up. And showing up isn't just I did the work. Showing up is talking and engaging and getting to know people. So if you can practice those skills in your classes now, then work is going to just be an extension of that, and finding the right people to help you navigate your career.
+1 to both of those suggestions. And I think the final thing that I'll add is that if you see something that you want to be happening at your job that isn't happening, and you have the space to make it happen, I would say do it. Like, ask if you can add this program, or ask if this, you know, if there's a thing that you want to see written that hasn't gotten written yet. I think that there is a lot of space to develop some new skills like Barbara was talking about, and also, you know, offer, what's the word, value to an organization by just being curious and being willing to take that on. And I think it is important that you're able to do, you know, all of the job functions that people expect of you, and then add something on top. But, you know, if you want to join a committee at work, or, you know, start an event series or something along those lines, I think it's just a really good way to touch some more people in your organization, and also sort of differentiate yourself, and yeah, just push outside of what your job role is, and give things a shot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely agree. For me, it has definitely been a big lesson for me to speak up and basically know what I can add to, you know, a certain project or space, and make sure that I'm confident in what I can bring to the table. And if not, do the work outside to make sure that maybe I can build a skill or be of value in that way. And I definitely agree with all of your answers. Right now, though, we need to get onto the Q&A segment. That was my drum roll. It didn't work. And the first question that we have is from Jessica. And Jessica asks, how do you know your worth and properly demonstrate that during interviews and negotiations, but also in a workplace with your peers and superiors? And if I can repeat it just in case. So the question is, how do you know your worth, and how do you properly demonstrate that during interviews and negotiations in a workplace with your peers and superiors?
I can hop in and put my recruiter hat on. One of the most important things when I was looking for someone who could do a job was analogous experiences that they had where they did something similar already, that there's a proven track record of having achieved X under Y circumstance. And so I think especially in an interview setting, if you know what the expectations are going to be, or make sure you do your research on the organization, of course. If you know what they're facing, use examples from your own work that are really directly tied. So not just like the best thing that you did, but the best example of how you can do what they need you to do. And those are, I think, sometimes it's hard to like not tell your favorite shining story. But if that is not the skill or the work that employer needs to get done, then you're gonna actually do a disservice to yourself. They can see that shiny silver part that you'll still bring to the table. But when there's a specific need that you can fill, make sure that you're telling that story and that version of yourself.
Yeah, and I just tag on for the second part. You're not always going to be able to like win your colleagues over or to show them, there's not always an amount of talking that is going to make them see your value. Different people have different priorities, and it is important to remind yourself of your value. I know I've been in spaces, just part of why I run my consulting company now. I've been in spaces where you forget your own worth, and you go through so much being beat down that it can be really hard to even remember, wait, I'm actually really good at this, And so spend less time trying to convince your colleagues that you are good at something. Show them by what you're doing, and keep doing the work and networking and showing up in the spaces. Because in my experience, tied to kind of what Barbara said, being tapped into different networks will get you mentioned in different spaces. And that is often what makes people start thinking of you as, oh, you must know what you're doing. So-and-so knows you, or you were at such and such meeting. So as far as like making your colleagues know your worth, I think it's really just doing those things to help grow your own skill set and network.
And I would also add, it's important to strike a balance with being confident and not being arrogant, but not being timid. And it's important to come into in a situation being confident. It's also important to demonstrate that you know the organization and that you've done your homework, and in such a way that you can prove or at least convey that you would be a good addition to that organization, or that you're due for a raise or for promotion. And I think that doing your homework, but also having a comfortable sense of confidence to convey that to the person that you're speaking with.
Wow, thank you so much. The next question I think that we have time for, this one is from Nancy. Nancy says, I am a teacher in a suburban public school that is predominantly white. What message would you send my students of color who don't necessarily see themselves as candidates for a school like Williams? And then I think once we get to this, we can squeeze in one more and wrap it up.
I would very simply say, like, we want you here. There's a huge community of, well, huge, as huge as things are at Williams. There's a strong and dedicated network of alumni of color who just want more students to come through Williams and to get the great things out of Williams that we know it can offer, and that we're doing what we can to support you, and we will be here if you need help. That we've gone through the school before, and there's a network that's willing to support you, and that truly, truly, truly we want you here.
110%. Barbara's, I'm curious your response since you also went to Howard. But I know from just my perspective would be find the people that have been through. We will love on you hard. The first call I always answer is a Williams call from anybody. So know that there is that kind of love from this community. Also, don't forget there are pipelines in white communities, privileged white communities especially, that actually work to get students in those schools. So don't be ashamed to be working on your own pipeline, right? We are centuries behind in that way. And so you absolutely belong there. If you are doing the work, if you have that drive, if you can really just reach out and you say, this is what I want from my life, reach out, find the people who can help you structure whatever you need to really balance out that system.
This is the easy way out, but I think Nicole and Cortney said it well. Yeah.
Okay, and our last question. Okay, our last question is from Catherine. Knowing what you know about adulting, how might you have approached your years at Williams differently?
I would have let myself nerd out more. I think that I often just felt overwhelmed by the work, and it's easy to feel like there's so much to do, you're doing extracurriculars, and I almost wish I knew that life only gets harder. And so, like learn, accept it, find your flow, but then keep pushing myself, because there are tons of things that I am like, man, I wish I could talk to my professors about this. And I wish I was, able to go back to a dorm now and just talk about this book with a bunch of people. And everyone's busy. So it's really hard to do that afterwards. So I think that's what I would change.
I think something that I would do differently, when I was a student at Williams, I never went to church when I was there. But what I found when I went to medical school was that I started going to church more frequently, and which is something that I've done more consistently over my life. I think that what I would have done, something I would have done that I did not do when I was there, I'm not sure that I would have gotten to church every Sunday, but I would have at least tried, maybe to go to maybe a Bible study session, join a Bible study group. What I have found, and I can just speak for me in my life, that faith has gotten me through many things. It's gotten me through some very positive experiences and through some very difficult situations in my life. And I think that going back, I would have incorporated more faith in my experience when I was a student. I think that it would have made my experience there more positive.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Valerie.
I think for me, I would have definitely stepped out of my comfort zone a little bit more. I think I would have joined Get Baked and, figure out how to bake and just honestly try as many things as possible. I felt like, at Williams, we're always so stressed. There's always a lot of work, but even in that, we still found time to, maybe visit the Clark or go on hikes and stuff. I think I would have spent my free time, if I wasn't planning events or something like that, I would have maybe joined different clubs, maybe learn how to knit, things of that nature. Because when you get out into the real world, unfortunately, unless, you have an Eventbrite that offers it for free, a lot of the hobbies that you would have normally been provided by Williams, like quilting, you kind of would have to pay for it. So I would do things that I wouldn't have to pay for now, essentially.
I think all of these are really good suggestions. And I think they kind of speak to the same thing, that is like, push outside of what you think you need. And if something like feels like it's calling to you, then go do it. I think there's three things. The first one was I would have taken more interesting winter study classes. That tends to be the time when things get really interesting on campus. Mine were good, but it could have been really cool. Like that, there's like a wine one and like a Russian cooking. Like there's just a lot of cool stuff. Two is I would have explored more in my later years at school. I think I did a pretty good job as a freshman. You know, you like go to the fair, the Purple Key Fair or something, and there's all the different things. And I like tried break dancing, and I wasn't good at it, and a bunch of different things. But then I sort of fell into the things that I did the rest of my time there. And I think it would have been cool my senior year to try out some other things that maybe had caught my attention, but I didn't do before. And the final one is I would challenge myself academically more. I ended up my senior spring having to take an extra class because of some like credit confusion with my study abroad. And it meant that I had, you know, a whole extra class on my plate that I thought was going to be, you know, this thing that I could barely handle. And it ended up being awesome and an opportunity for me to do the things that I really like wanted to study all in the same semester. So I think like pushing yourself a little bit, whether it's taking that class that feels intimidating or tacking on an extra class to a semester because you don't want to miss it. I think that you can do it.
Well, awesome. So Sisterhood has a tradition during our general meetings where we do a flaunt it. I feel like, you know, many of us are humble and we don't like to celebrate the awesome and amazing things that happen to us in our personal, professional, and even just throughout the week. So right now I would like to sort of have a flaunt it moment. I can start off by start off with the flaunt it just to give you an example. But for instance, my flaunt it was that this week I tried something new, and instead of just like doing like a regular like pop sugar course to like work out, instead I went up on the roof and just really tried to like meditate and really take care of my body in a way that I never really did before, and was really intentional about breathing. And that to me sort of set the pace for the rest of my week to be clear-headed and open. And that was a huge step for me in my personal development, because I feel like I'm always too hard on myself and I try to do things a certain way. So stepping out of my routine in this quarantine, but that to me was like a flaunt it moment.
I have something I want to say. I don't quite have a flaunted moment, but there was a question that was given to me in terms of how sisterhood has affected me. And this is a kind of flaunted. But when I came, Sisterhood was not in existence when I came here, but when I came to Williams, women had recently started coming to the school. Several of the Ivy League schools had not started accepting women yet. But there was a sisterhood at Williams when I arrived on campus in September of 1975. And there, as soon as I got on campus, there were Black upper class women who came right to me. They found me. It was clear they were going to help me get through this place. Some of them knew that I wanted to be a doctor. And there's always been a sort of sisterhood on campus. I think of people like Deborah Gould and Darylyn Arnell, who are class of 76. Robin Ellett, who was one of my JAs, she's class of 77, and her co-JA, Janet Costigan. Jackie Higgs, who was in class of 78, who really got me to come to Williams, someone that I grew up with. Paula Tabor, who worked with alumni relations for a number of years. And one of my classmates, who is one of my BFFs, Kathy Sharp Jones, who we have still been in communication regularly since we graduated. So I think that it's good that you have formalized the sisterhood, because it has been in existence in some form or fashion for most of the time that Black women have been on campus. So I just want to give that shout out, because these are people, and I can't even name everybody. And there was also a brotherhood too. But I just want to give it a shout out, because there were a lot of people who were very instrumental in helping me to get through Williams, and really had a big impact on my life.
Right, exactly, same thing. As soon as I walked on campus, a couple Black women pulled me to the side and said, if there's anything you want to do, just do it. We're here. And I was like, okay, we need a budget. We need to, like, we need to make this a thing. So I definitely, I'm very happy to hear that this is very much ingrained in Williams, this sisterhood, whether it's a formal group or not. It's nice to know that even before, me and all of us, that sisterhood was something that was passed down. And just really quickly, Cortney, Nicole, can we get your flaunt it, and then we'll wrap up?
Sure. I think my flaunt it thing would be just showing up. Being here on this call, connecting with you all. I was able to do an Instagram television kind of thing this week, sharing one of my talks. And sometimes it's exhausting to show up. Sometimes it's hard, particularly when the news is so difficult. So getting both the physical energy and the emotional energy to just show up and connect has just been so fulfilling for me. And I guess that would be my flaunt it moment, because I've gotten to talk to all of you and my heart is just really full and I feel really happy. And I'm like, oh my goodness, there's these wonderful women that I just want to learn more from, and I want to talk to them more. So yeah, that would be my flaunt it.
Great.
My flaunt it, I think, is a little more traditional in that last week I hosted a call with my organization with Stacey Abrams, and it was so amazing. And I had fought really hard to get this kind of speaker series off the ground in the time of COVID. And Stacey Abrams was as amazing as you might imagine her to be. And I just I can't believe that there's a screenshot in the world where like my face and Stacey Abrams' face are on the same screen. So that is my flaunt it for right now.
Wow, that's amazing.
Woohoo! Sorry, I had to unmute myself just so you could hear the cheering that's happening over here. Because that's awesome. And let's
Thank
connect.
you very much.
There is another Eve who has been doing speaker series. He recently had Dolores Huerta on. So yeah, let's talk and get your speaker series just floating us through COVID.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in. A special thank you goes to our wonderful panelists, Cortney, Nicole, and Barbara. Thank you for sharing your advice and perspectives. We appreciate your wisdom and guidance, especially during this difficult time. Most of all, thank you for just being you and choosing to be great in this world that expects otherwise. I'd also like to take the opportunity to shout out the current Sisterhood board, who continued to work hard for this weekend, even when coronavirus tried not to let us be great. Specifically, thank you to our co-presidents, Sonia Niarco, class of 21, and Cassie Deschamps, class of 21, the secretary, Sade McLean, class of 21, the treasurer, Marianne St. Just, class of 21, our senior advisor, Yasneri Cabrera, class of 2020, our Minko representative, Masi Alexander, class of 21, and last but not least, our public relations executive, class of 2022, Kaylin Gibson. Last but not least, a huge thank you goes to the Alumni Relations Office, to Layla Derstein, Juan Baina, and Sharifa Wright, who I would like to congratulate on the birth of her beautiful baby girl. Happy Mother's Day. Without everyone's efforts, we would still be bored in the house and in the house board. So I'm grateful for this unique opportunity for personal growth. And if not for Sisterhood, as we all know, I would not be here today. I would not be who I am. And it is my continued hope that Sisterhood will be a guiding light and a strong and unifying force in the community that empowers Black women. After all, if we don't do it ourselves, it will not be done for us. Please be on the lookout for future opportunities to connect with Sisterhood. Follow us on Instagram at Sisterhood _@_Williams. And most of all, remember to prioritize your safety and wellness during this time. Until next time, and happy Mother's Day.